Can you briefly describe what's happened so far?
Yeah, we invested in an apartment in Cyprus with an initial deposit of around £25,000. Things haven't gone very well there, and after a few years the development stopped. The bank stopped lending money to the developers, and in the end we've had to take legal advice, and we're now using Cypriot lawyers and barristers to try and get the money back.
Yeah. Okay, so when was it that you realised that things weren't going as planned?
It was only a couple of years ago. The building had missed its finish date and we'd heard nothing apart from to be told that everything was fine. And then we got a call from TaylorMade, who asked everybody who was involved in the development to attend a meeting where they explained to us in more detail the problems that they were having.
Yeah. So what happened at the meeting then? What were you told at the meeting?
Basically that the bank had reneged on its deal. It had stopped giving money to the developers to carry on. There was only minimal groundwork done on the development side, and the bank had actually drawn down on some mortgages. Out of about 120 developments, 16 developments have been drawn down, so basically they were charging a mortgage to those 16 developments even though nothing had been built. One of those developments was ours, so bank charges were accruing at quite a rate.
We were very concerned.
Yeah, very concerned. So they told us at the meeting that you couldn't do nothing, that we'd have to seek legal advice at least, or hire lawyers, which is what we did.
Right. So so after the meeting, you still got your biannual statements, and then you got a letter from Alpha Bank afterwards saying that you were still getting charged interest on a mortgage that they hadn't paid out on. So, and then that said that they could seize your UK assets. So how did that make you feel?
Well, I cried because obviously we do actually own the house we live in, so that was at risk. So we would have essentially no house to live in. But we contacted the lawyers that we'd employed, the Cypriot lawyers, and they just said that they were just using scare tactics. We sent them a copy of the letter, and they sent us a letter to sign and send back to the bank to say that we had legal representation, and if they wanted to contact us again, they needed to do it through our solicitors, which they seem to have taken no notice of. They still send letters to us occasionally.
So how were you initially approached for the investment opportunity?
Through an independent financial advisor that I'd known for quite a number of years. Used him on various investments, and he'd actually got one of these apartments built by this developer. Said it was a good idea. There was no movement in investments in the UK at that time. There was no interest rate for anything, and this was the best way to go with the lump sum that we had to invest.
So did you stay in contact with this financial advisor throughout the whole investment?
No, as soon as it started to go wrong, it was very difficult to get hold of, and he became ill apparently, and said he'd stopped working, but that wasn't the case at all, because we found out since that he's opened his own business and he's now trading again. But we have no contact with him at all now.
And was this someone that you trusted?
Very much so, yes. Yeah, he'd worked well for us in the past, but once things started to go wrong, it seemed that he didn't want to know us.
So you got a letter in January of this year, 2015, saying that your mortgage had been wiped clear due to arrangement.
It wasn't so much a letter, it was actually the biannual statement came, and instead of us owing them X amount of €1,000, hundreds of thousands of euros, it had gone to zero, nothing, and it had said that the agreement had been terminated, which again was news to us, because it's just another game that the bank's playing.
We'd made no agreement with anybody, had we?
No. I mean, we're glad that our statements now show that we know them nothing, but at the same time, they've taken it on themselves to cancel the agreement. Nothing on our side.
And had your legal representation heard of it before, like you had? Or
No,
was
we
this
just
new
sent
to
them
them
a
as well?
copy.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't really say. We just sent them a copy and just said they just told us to ignore it. It was just more evidence against the bank, basically.
Playing games.
Playing games. Fraud, again.
So what's happening now? What's ongoing with the case?
Basically, it's in the hands of the lawyers. As anything in legal terms, it moves incredibly slowly. And they're trying to get as many other people on board as possible so that it strengthens their case. So really, it's just a waiting game, but the worry's been taken out of it a little bit. So we feel a little bit better about that, don't we? That the bank have said we don't owe them anything. So
What we now want is the money back.
yeah,
The
that's what we're
deposit they
hoping
paid.
for. Yeah.
The lawyers are now fighting to get that back, plus any damages that may
What
have
what
occurred.
what do you consider damages?
Well, the worry. That's always taken into consideration, the stress and the worry. And also, if we'd invested it somewhere else, we invested in, was it 2008?
Yeah, 2008.
So that's 7 years. We'd have had interest on that money and we've not earned a penny on it. So that's another thing that they try and claim back.